for an entire month because the baby is coming any day. But you would have been perfect. You would have been perfect. So I'm sorry because I'm holding my shop and I'm not going to pick up until like November. But, you know, that's your time that you need. And she said, sorry, I just told my husband next Friday I'm closing the shop. Yeah. So I was like, oh, and then one lady, she said,
Hey.
All of us to have her in there and her table and her room for anybody else to get in there.
Carol, I'm having a real hard time hearing you.
Oh, okay. Probably because I got it paired to that speaker. I'm driving home. So if you lose me, that's fine. If I lose you, that's fine. I'll just look at the archive.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, but I really wanted to come into the class. So pardon me if I'm driving. I'm just going to mute myself, okay?
Okay.
All right, dear. Thanks.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. Hello. Who's got questions about pastries or whatever? What class is this? Cake class. Who has questions about cake? Pamela is waving at me. What's up, Pamela?
On vacation.
Are you in Key West, Florida?
No, I am in Nebraska.
Oh, okay. That sounds like fun.
On my way to Minnesota.
Cool. Well, who's got cake questions? Glinda says she's got a question. When we put the mousse on the cakes, do we freeze the mousse? I know that times I've done bomb-like things, I've always frozen the mousse and it works best. Yes. Wait, can we freeze it after putting it on the cakes before the glaze? Yes, you want to assemble the cake with the mousse and then freeze it before you put the glaze on it. If you were not going to glaze it, I mean, you have to glaze it for this project, but if just like in the future, if you don't want to glaze a mousse cake, you don't necessarily have to freeze it. You just have to chill it until it sets up. But for this project, you definitely need to freeze it. And then just kind of a little trick, when you take it out of the freezer, let it sit for like 5 or 10 minutes or so, just so it kind of like get rid of that little layer of frost that it might have on it, and your glaze will have an easier time sticking to it. It still needs to be frozen, but if you just let it thaw for like 5 or 10 minutes and kind of temper a little bit, it'll lose that frost layer, and you know, whatever you're enrobing it with will have an easier time sticking to it. What else? What else?
I think I saw the mousse recipe and I saw the cake recipe. No, I saw the mirror glaze recipe. I have all of my ingredients. Cake recipe. You want which mousse? Any mousse?
The mousse has to be a pas de bombe technique. So it doesn't have to be the recipe that's on our page, but it's got to have a pas de bombe in it, just like the recipe. So like I sent somebody the other day, I think I sent them a passion fruit mousse recipe, and we substituted honey for passion fruit to make a honey mousse, but it was based on a pas de bombe. So whatever recipe you have just has to have a pas de bombe in it, but it doesn't have to be the chocolate mousse. Same goes for the cake. It's got to be a 2-stage method cake, but it does not have to be chocolate. It can, you know, if you find another one that you like, you can use whatever. As long as you're sticking to the techniques, you can use whatever recipes you like.
I think I'm using the recipe from the class for the cake and also for the mirror glaze because it makes a substantial amount. So I'm just looking for a mousse recipe to use with it, and I'm probably going to go back to the chapter and look at the mousse with the variation of mousse and choose one of those to use with it. I think I can do that.
Yeah. Yep, as long as it's got a pat of bomb, and it
But
can
it
be a,
doesn't have to all be chocolate.
sorry, what?
All of it doesn't have to be that chocolate. Can it be white chocolate or red or strawberry?
Any flavor. There I lost her again. My cell phone is for texting, my cell phone is 504-612-2301. For calling, it is 919-655-1382. It's on the class page on the right side, I think. Is one on page 398. I think I made us a yellow cake. Let me check. Let me look at the textbook right now. 398. $398. Oh, wait. Where is it? Maybe I should share my screen. Screen share. $398. This is a two-stage method cake. Yeah, this one is a good alternative to the chocolate cake because you can make a lot of different flavors of cake with this. It doesn't have to just be yellow or strawberry or cherry cake. There's a whole bunch of different variations. You can just kind of use your imagination. You can look at these flavors and just kind of think of, what could I add instead of strawberry? Maybe you want to make it a banana cake or a raspberry cake. You just kind of have to substitute in the flavoring, the fruit puree, basically. Cherries, this one's a little bit different because it's made with maraschino cherries, which is going to have a lot of a different flavor than like fresh cherries.
And the one ingredient everyone's talking about for our beauty is black elderberry.
What was that? What was that? So somebody say something?
Like for the puree on the fruit, if we're doing it, would all of them be the same amount or the same weight in gram, or would you use more or less depending on the fruit for the puree?
Of that particular recipe we were just looking at, the white cake? I mean, different fruits have different moisture levels. So if you try to think of what a strawberry is going to be like when you grind it up, it's going to be really wet. Think about for a banana, for example, if you grind up a banana, it's not going to be really wet. So you might want to add a little bit of water to it to make it the kind of same consistency. But I would pretty much go with that measurement for if you're adding fruit puree. But just like I said, just kind of think about the moisture level of your puree, and you might want to kind of wet it down. But other things like raspberries or blueberries or blackberries are going to have a very similar moisture content. But now these in the recipe, these are frozen strawberries. So frozen fruit is going to be a lot more wet than fresh fruit too. So kind of take that into consideration.
So what should we do to get rid of some of that juice? Should we like drain it or towel blot it or?
This one here, it's using frozen and it does not indicate to remove the juice. But if you're going to use fresh fruit, you might want to add a little bit of water to kind of make it more like it would be if it was the frozen. It's just going to be a little bit more wet. Kind of like when you're making a smoothie, when you grind up frozen fruit and it's like really, really, really wet, you want to add,
Like I've got all my ingredients sitting on the countertop, and that's the only thing that stopped me from putting it together. Like I don't know like what I'm gonna do, and it's none of these chocolate cake from the recipe. the mirror glaze from the chapter, but I don't know what like I'm stuck on the boot for the middle.
What did you say? You don't know what to do? What about the mousse in the middle?
I'm stuck on the mousse in the middle. Like if I wanted to do like a peach, maybe I could do that, or maybe I could do strawberry, or maybe I should stick to raspberry. But like maybe it will ask for 250 grams of peaches, but it'll only ask for 190 grams of strawberry. I don't know.
I can send you the recipe that I sent somebody the other day for the passion fruit mousse, and you can probably substitute any type of fruit for that. That one had a gelatin in it also. It was a pâte de bombe mousse recipe, but there was a little bit of gelatin in it holding it together. But that one, like, because it called for passion fruit pulp, which is kind of, you know, a little bit damp too. That one would be good to kind of substitute other fruits for.
Okay. If I could get that recipe and look at it, I certainly appreciate that.
Yeah.
I just like to learn it.
I will add it. I'll add it to the class page as soon as we're done talking. That way everybody can see it.
Okay, great.
But things that you have to keep in consideration about mousses and cakes is that sometimes it just takes experience, like, you know, to kind of gauge, you know, when you're like, for that particular question, how much fruit should I add? You know, it just kind of takes some experience, you know, thinking about what the fruit is like, and, you know, what it was like the first time you made it with a certain type of fruit, and what it was like the next time you made it with a different type of fruit. So, you know, if it's not like perfect the first time, just, you know, it's good to take notes. It's good to take notes and compare. That's how we do for, like, you know, for recipe development and stuff. It's not always going to come out right the first time, but I have some other mousse recipes that I can share with you guys, but they're not based on a pâte de bombe, but they're just good to have. Using just a basic fruit puree, which can be substituted for any type of fruit puree, and it's a gelatin-based recipe too. So it's good to know, like, if you want to make mousse cakes or mousse cups or anything, I can share that with you guys also. Who else has questions? Text. Anybody? Okay, I'm entering my phone numbers into the chat room. These are new numbers to me, so I don't know them off the top of my head. I think it's kind of weird that we have to have 2 different phone numbers. So many different programs we have to use for this company. It's really testing my technical knowledge. Okay, there they are. What else? Rachel told me that you guys had some questions. You guys were going to give me an onslaught of questions about something.
Now, when we're talking about the mousse, but isn't there a part of it? I think I saw it where we're using a ganache to layer the cake before we actually put the glaze on it.
No, you don't need to put any ganache on the cake, but what we were talking about was crumb coating it with something. You could crumb coat the cake with the mousse itself, because because basically what you need to do is seal the cake before you pour the glaze on. So let's say you are using ganache as your glaze, you could crumb coat the cake with the ganache. I would set a little bit aside and let it cool off, so it's more like icing consistency, so it's scoopable, and then you could actually spread that onto the cake as if it was icing, and then let that chill for a little while, or freeze or whatever, and then pour your ganache over it. But whatever you're doing, whether it's ganache or mirror glaze, the cake does need to be crumb coated with something. And even if you had some spare buttercream laying around, like let's say we were in a bakery and I built this mousse cake and I just didn't have any extra mousse to crumb coat the cake with, you could take a couple tablespoons of, you know, buttercream and crumb coat the cake, and then freeze it, and then pour your mirror glaze or your ganache over it. It just needs to be crumb coated, so that the mousse doesn't, or the glaze doesn't soak into the cake layers.
I have a little of that Italian buttercream left from last week.
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay, great.
Yep. Yep. It's good to be able to cross-utilize the product.
Right, it is. Very economical.
Yeah. Asha, you have a question?
What is the best technique for cutting the cake while it's frozen?
I wouldn't cut it when it's frozen solid because you really run the risk of cutting your other hand, because you know how when you slice a cake, you put one hand on top of it and then you
Yeah.
kind of like push the knife through it. If your cake is frozen solid and you're trying to like push that knife through it, there's a good chance you're going to slip and cut either your hand if like your finger's dangling off, or you'll cut your arm. So just let it thaw out a little bit. I usually pop mine in the microwave for like 30 seconds. You want it to be nice and cold, but I don't think it's a good idea for anybody to cut a cake that's frozen solid.
Okay.
It is really risky.
Is it easier, do you think, to cut while it's frozen, or would it be better to cut it when it's still warm and I wrap it up real fast and then let it cool and then pop it in the freezer?
Well, it needs to cool sufficiently. Like, it can't be freshly baked. It needs to, that's part of the baking process, actually, is the cooling process. So you, either way, whether you leave it at room temperature for several hours to let it cool while it's wrapped, or you pop it in the cooler, or you put it in the freezer, it just needs to be cold and it needs to be thoroughly chilled. But I would not try to push a knife through a frozen cake because, like I said, it's just dangerous. If you cut it before you freeze it, like let's say you cool it sufficiently and then you cut it and then you freeze the layers, that it's easier to kind of build a cake that way when the layers are frozen, because the filling will get nice and tight right away and the icing will get, you know, hard. Like as soon as you crumb coat it, you probably won't even need to chill it. The crumb coat is just going to get hard on its own because the cake was cold. So that's an option, is cutting it before you freeze it, but don't try to cut a frozen.
Yeah, I wasn't going to cut it while it was frozen solid. I was just curious if it was going to be easier to cut after you'd frozen it or before.
No, it just needs to cool sufficiently, because when it's still warm, it's going to be really delicate. It really is. It's going to like start crumbling apart and everything. It needs time to cool sufficiently. And like I said the other day, I like to just let my cakes cool at room temperature overnight. I just wrap them up really good with plastic wrap after they cooled for maybe an hour or so. I wrap them up and then I let them cool at room temperature overnight. And that way they're still nice and moist the next day, and the knife is really easy to slice right through them.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. No. What else? What else? Have I heard from Glennie yet? No? Anybody else got any questions? Have you guys started looking into purchasing your gum paste equipment? That's something, it doesn't take weeks and weeks to obtain gum paste equipment, but you do want to look into that sooner rather than later, because we do have our final project coming up where you need to make some gum paste flowers. So you're going to want to look into getting the little foam mat that you roll the gum paste on, and you know, a ball tool, maybe some cutters. Are we making our own fondant? You can. There's a recipe which we'll go over, or you can buy it store-bought. The school does not want you to make marshmallow fondant because it's technically not real fondant. But I have been authorized to at least speak about marshmallow fondant. It's super trendy right now, especially for home cake decorators. Has anybody ever made it or heard of it? or had experience with it or tasted it or wrapped themselves in it? Okay. Yes, it does taste good. I like it much better than regular like commercial fondant because it actually tastes good. It tastes like marshmallows, and who doesn't love marshmallows? I know there's a lot of people out there who don't like marshmallows, but most people do, and marshmallows are freaking awesome, and that's what it tastes like. So basically what you do is you take 2 ounces of water, 2 ounces of shortening, and you melt it over a double boiler. That's how I like to do it. And then you add 1 pound marshmallows. I like to use the mini ones because they're just easier to melt, but the regular size marshmallows will do. And then you melt it almost completely. Take it off the heat, put it in the mixer with the paddle attachment. Mix for a minute to cool it down. Sorry I'm talking like that, but I'm talking while I type. Mix for a minute to cool it down, and then you're going to add, what is it, 2 pounds. You're going to add about 28 to 40 ounces of powdered sugar. And I know that's a big gray area there, but it's just depending on your climate, like what the humidity is in your region. Sometimes, like if you live up in the mountains of Colorado, it might be really dry and somewhat cool, in which case you might not need as much powdered sugar to stabilize this product. If you're working in a really hot and humid climate, you're going to need more powdered sugar. So basically you just add powdered sugar and stir it up until it reaches like a Play-Doh like consistency. And then you knead it by hand. You're going to want to rub shortening on your hands, and then you knead it by hand until it's nice and smooth and lump free. You have to make sure your table is really clean. And then you wrap it up with plastic wrap, and you let it cool at room temperature for a couple hours, because now this is a very, very important step. You have to let it cool at room temperature for a couple hours, because when it's warm, it feels like it's more wet than it actually is when it's cool. And you're not going to work with warm fondant, you're going to work with cool fondant. So when it's warm, you're going to be like, oh, I need more powdered sugar, I need more powdered sugar. But no, you want to wrap it with plastic wrap and let it cool at room temperature for maybe like 2 or 3 hours to get it back to room temperature, and then assess the texture. Do I need to add a little more powdered sugar? Do I not need to? Because once you add too much powdered sugar, there's no going back. If you made it too dry, you've ruined it, and I don't know what you're going to do with it, but you can't use it to cover a cake. So but I love marshmallow fondant. I use it almost exclusively when I'm decorating cakes from my house because it's cheap. You can, 2 ounces of shortening, what does that cost you? Like 15 cents. Water, I guess, I mean, water's not necessarily free, but 2 ounces of water doesn't cost anything. Powdered sugar, you can get 2 pounds of powdered sugar for about $3.50, and marshmallows, depending on what kind you buy, could be a pound, or it could be $1, it could be $3, but it's a lot cheaper than store-bought fondant. This is my sous chef. Go away. Did I just blow your mind? Nobody's saying anything. But that's not part of the project, so you don't want to do marshmallow fondant. Carol, you sound like an alien from that movie Arrival. You're like,
But marshmallow fondant, I'm about to be home.
Okay. Did you have a question about marshmallow fondant? Because I couldn't hear you.
I was asking, wouldn't it melt in the Georgia heat if I made it and tried to put it on a cake? Like, wouldn't it droop?
I'm gonna show you some pictures right now because I stand up for marshmallow fondant if you make it correctly. Like, I live in North Carolina and it's hot as hell here for most of the year, and it's humid too. And in my kitchen, the kitchen where I worked last, it was like 80% humidity in there because the people could never get the air conditioning system right, and that's all we used was marshmallow fondant. So let me find the pictures. I'm going to screen share here. Screen share. And where did I put them? What am I doing? They are in Drive. 121 lesson plans. Cakes with marshmallow fondant. These are all cakes that I have made in the recent past using marshmallow fondant within like the past 2 years.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh my.
Marshmallow fondant. That's 100% marshmallow fondant.
Is it? And it stood up that long. It didn't droop or anything. That looks gorgeous.
Thank you. No, if you make it right, I mean, you've got to, I mean, it takes a little bit of experience, you know, to know. I think that the key is knowing what actual real fondant, the consistency is like. I mean, if you've never worked with fondant before in your life and you try making marshmallow fondant, you're not going to know what it's supposed to be like. But after you've worked with fondant and you're like, you know what it's supposed to feel like and how it's supposed to work, and you make this marshmallow fondant recipe, and you do it correctly, it works really well. So, but yeah, these are thanks. These were all cakes that we made in class. These were my demo cakes, and I would usually make something like this for wedding cake week when I had to showcase how to cover a cake in fondant and how to make the gum paste flowers. And these
flowers are gorgeous.
Thank you. These are all made by hand. I made this one for my son's 5th birthday party. But yeah, I think it works really well. So you can't make it for your project. You have to either make the real fondant or use the store-bought rolled fondant, but you should definitely give it a try because I think it's really good. And like I said, it's super trendy right now. And it's a good thing to know how to do, especially because it's cheap to make and it tastes good. So.
Wow, I think I'll be playing with it to see what it does. Maybe I'll like that better, and then I'll just make my own fondant rather than buying it from now on.
Yeah, I mean, I use it, and I worked in a high volume bakery in Chicago where we made a lot of wedding cakes throughout the year. It wasn't a cake shop, but it was a bakery, and we made a lot of wedding cakes. And I would make this marshmallow fondant in an 80-quart mixer, like huge batches of it, where we're putting like 20. Go away! I'm in class. Thank you. He's nosy. We're putting like 20 pounds of marshmallows in the bowl and mixing it up. And the cool thing about marshmallow fondant is that you can break it up into smaller chunks and wrap it really good. Like if you wrap it 2 or 3 times with plastic wrap and then put it in a Ziploc bag and label it, you can put it in the freezer. You can freeze it and then take it out 6 months later, thaw it, and like kind of like re-knead it to recondition it and use it, and it'll be good. I mean, it doesn't last forever, but I would say like 6 months. So, you know, if you made it for a cake order and you had leftovers, you can pop it in your fridge or in the freezer and it'll be good for, you know, the next time you need it. You just have to kind of like massage it to get it to be like elasticy again. Because when it comes out of the cold, it's going to feel really brittle. But if you let it come back up to room temperature and then you give it a good rub down, it'll work. What is CMC? I feel like I know what that means, but I'm having like a brain fart. Sheila. CMC.
They say
Now I
it's
found like
some kind of powder that you mix in with the fondant to stabilize it. Have you ever used it?
I think it's like Tylose. Let me look it up. CMC powder. I'm going to screen share here what I'm looking for, what I'm looking at. Yeah, CMC powder is the British version of what we call Gum-Tex here in America. It's basically powdered, it's powdered like gelatin, and it's got Tylose powder in it too, and that is the ingredient that makes fondant like elasticy and it holds its shape, and that's also the ingredient that makes homemade gum paste hold its shape too. You guys want to see my homemade gum paste recipe? I know that you don't have to make gum paste for this class, but you can see my recipe. Where is it? Gum paste. Okay. Gum paste. This is my gum paste recipe, and you can write it down if you want to, or I can send it to you guys. But this is the one I use. You put an egg white down in the bottom of the bowl. You bloom some gelatin. You mix these two ingredients together and heat them up just until they're hot, and then you add it to the bloom gelatin, and you mix all four ingredients together until it's nice and melted and the gelatin is dissolved. And then you put it in the bowl on top of the egg whites with these three ingredients, one of which is CMC powder, also known as gum tragacanth or Tylose powder, and you mix it all together, and then you put shortening on your hands and you knead it until it's smooth. And that is how I made all those flowers that you just saw in those pictures. Homemade gum paste. And again, this is real gum paste, and it's way cheaper to make it this way than it is to like buy the store-bought gum paste, but this is only cheaper if you're going to be using gum paste all the time. I actually have a gallon of glycerin in my office somewhere. I was going to show you, but I don't know where it is right now, which I bought for my last school, and then we got shut down, so now I've got a gallon of glycerin that I don't really know what to do with, because it's going to take me forever to use the whole gallon to make gum paste, because it's only half an ounce for every batch of gum paste. So I'll be working with that glycerin until the day I die. It's kind of sad. What other questions do you have? Nobody?
Chef, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
When I went to Hobby Lobby to get the gum paste, I thought it was actual gum paste already together, but it was the powder that you mix with water.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever used that?
Yeah, it works okay as long as you mix it with the right amount of water. I know it's going to have a recipe on the label, but it like just like anything else, it kind of takes some experience to know how much water you should really add to it. And again, it's depending on your climate and what the weather's like. If it says,
I'm in South Carolina, so it's
yeah. I would start by adding a little bit of less water. And like I said before, it's just like the fondant, the marshmallow fondant. That type of product, like the powdered gum paste, it's only really handy when you know what gum paste feels like. what it looks like,
Okay.
how it feels in your fingers, because until you actually know what it's supposed to be like, it's hard to make your own.
Okay.
So like that recipe I just showed you, we would make that in class if we were going to be all together, and I could demo it for you, and you could like touch mine and you could feel what it was supposed to feel like. But doing it on your own, it's kind of like maybe you make that recipe another time after you bought like the satin ice gum paste or something. Satin ice is probably my go-to. You can get it, I'm going to screen share, you can get it on online, but that is like the #1 brand of commercial gum paste, and fondant. They sell fondant too. Satin ice, that's what it looks like right there. And I believe it comes in different colors too, as well as rolled fondant. Like you could get like red fondant or blue or black fondant, because sometimes it's hard to make saturated colors like that. But this is like a really popular brand. Looks like it comes from Amazon too.
What about Wilton? Is Wilton a good brand?
Wilton fondant is good, but I have not worked with the gum paste before.
Because I know at Hobby Lobby, when I went to Hobby Lobby, they got every color that's already the colored fondants, and they were like $8.99 a box.
Yeah, the fondant is good. They changed their recipe 4 or 5 years ago, and it's a really good product. But I haven't tried the actual gum paste yet. Here's another recipe that I want to show you. If you had some fondant, if you made marshmallow fondant, or you just had regular fondant laying around, and you add some of that CMC or Tylose or Gum-Tex powder to it, you can make your own gum paste. Like if you're in a pinch and all of a sudden you ran out of gum paste and you need some more, or you just want to make it this way anyway, if you have the fondant and you add the powder to it in this ratio right here, you can make kind of your own makeshift gum paste. This is good to know for like when you're making those swags on the side of wedding cakes. Like, let me see. Oops. These types of things. Where is it? If you don't want to do this with just like regular fondant because it's not going to hold its shape, but if you mix it with gum paste like 50-50, or if you just use straight up gum paste to make that works a lot better. So like that recipe I just showed you, you would use to make the swags.
Are you gonna put all the recipes in the online or email?
Yeah. The ones I just showed you for the fondant and stuff, I can add them to the page.
Okay.
They're not to be confused with the class recipes. They're just like supplemental materials just for you to have for the future.
Okay. Let me ask you a question, because when I went to Hobby Lobby, they didn't have the metal, the balling tip. They didn't have the metal kind. They sold the plastic kind.
Yeah, that's no good. I wouldn't waste my money on the plastic kind because it has that seam, and the seam 9.9 times out of 10 times it's going to rip the gum paste when you're trying to ruffle the edges. I would definitely go on Amazon and order the metal ball tools, and they're only like $4 or $5, and they send you a whole bunch of them instead of just one too.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Sometimes the cheaper metal ball tools, they kind of have imperfections, like little bumps on them, but it's still better than using the plastic ones with the seam. Like I have the cheap metal ball tools. I've got several sets of them that I have just to have in the classroom, and they work. They're so much better than the plastic ones. I would go that route, the cheaper end of the metal ball tools, while you're just beginning, just to figure out if this is something that you're like really like, because gum paste flowers, it's kind of like one of those specialty crafts that you're just not going to do it if you don't enjoy doing it, because it's so tedious and like detail oriented, and they take long time to make them. Like some flowers take upwards of a week to create, just because you have to make each separate part and let them dry, and the next day you glue it together and they make another part and let it dry and glue it together. So they take, they're kind of painstaking products, and I wouldn't go like sinking in, you know, $100 on equipment if you don't know if you actually, you know, want to make them again. So maybe 10 bucks tops. Get those cheaper metal ball tools, and then you just need some basic round cutters to make roses if you want to make roses, or you could get a real cheap set of gum paste cutters for like $7 or $8. And those little foam mats that they use to roll the petals on. I actually buy mine at the Dollar Tree in the craft section. They sell them in little packs. They're like rainbow stacks of styrofoam. They're called cell foam. And if you grab some of those for $1 and you just glue a few of them together, you can make your own cell foam mat. And you can make several of them for $1 instead of going to the craft store and buying one for like $5 to $10. I learned that trick because I taught a gum paste flower class at the America's Sweets and Baking Show back in Illinois in 2014, and my boss told me that I had like $100 budget to buy supplies for this class for like 20 students, and I was thinking there's no way, but there was. I just got some cheap cutters. I got the metal ball tools that were like $3 a pack of 4, and I went to the Dollar Tree, bought some of that foam, and I got some PVC pipe, the thin one, and the long piece, and I cut it into little chunks to make like a 6-inch rolling pin. And that is a cheap and economical way to make gum paste flower tools when you don't have a lot of money to spend. If you don't want to buy like one of those little rolling pins, you could just go to the hardware store and ask them to cut off 6 inches of a PVC pipe, and it'll cost you 30 cents. Go to the Dollar Tree and spend $1 on some of those little rainbow colored foam pieces, and buy yourself a $3.50 pack of metal ball tools. And as far as the cutters, like round cutters to make roses, you don't even need cutters. You can just use the back of one of your large piping tips. Boom.
So I got a really innovative idea today when I was in the dollar store, because I went to Dollar Tree. And I was looking for, it is the best. I was looking for some items to clean my car because I had to go do my lift. But while I was there, I was thinking those metal plates that they have, the little dishes they have, and they had the metal bowl there as well. So I got 2 of the metal plates and 1 metal bowl, and I turned it upside down, and that looks sufficient enough for my cake stand. So I'm going to drill a screw in the center and put 2 washers, and I'm going to screw it together, and I have my little turntable for my cake.
There you go.
So I thought that was pretty innovative. I was like, yes.
I like that idea.
Yep.
Yeah, the Dollar Tree is so great for when you only have like a few dollars and you need you need something. And you're like, Dollar Tree's got to have it. They have to have the answer. Except don't buy your underwear at the Dollar Tree. They don't last more than like once. I think the Dollar Tree is for like when you're out and at the club and you drink so much that you ruin all your clothing and you're just like, I need at least a pair of underwear. You can go to the Dollar Tree and get one of those. And while you're there, you can get a Gatorade to rehydrate because it's good to be hydrated.
Dollar Tree is your backup store.
Anybody else? I got this little boy who keeps sneaking in here. I think he wants mommy to go. He wants to watch Growing Pains. He's like obsessed with Growing Pains. It's on Amazon right now. He's like, "Can we watch Growing Pains?" He thinks it's the coolest show ever. He likes the season that has Leonardo DiCaprio in it.
That was a cool episode.
Yeah. Well, if nobody else has any questions, I will say good night, and I will see you on Wednesday.
The extra session has been very helpful tonight, so thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure. I'll keep coming. I had an extra session for my other class about an hour ago, but only one person showed up, and she and I talked for about 10 minutes about goat's milk, completely unrelated, and then I was like, all right, I'm going to go because nobody else is here. So thanks for coming. Otherwise, I would have, just been doing whatever, but thanks for coming, and we'll continue to do this every week as long as people want to join me.
Sounds great.
Okay,
thank you.
You're welcome. You guys have a wonderful night.
Thank you. All right, good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.